Are you ready to get footloose? Hi, Dr. Zach Couples with Elevate Sports Performance and Healthcare here, and I want to talk to you a little bit about choosing the right shoes. There's a lot of potential shoes out there that you could choose from, and there's a lot of different camps. Do I get minimalist shoes? Do I go barefoot? Do I get the most stable shoes possible? I will try to answer those questions and more for you today. Now, the first question we have to ask ourselves is what does a normal foot do when we walk? Well, I'm glad you asked. What the foot should do as you're walking is it should, as you land, create an arch. So if my hand was our feet, it's going to create an arch. It's going to flatten, and then it's going to re-arch as we go off of the big toe. So ideally, you want a shoe that allows you to do that. This shoe, this Under Armour shoe, is a good example of a shoe that can allow you to do that because it has all of those components. In order for you to get that movement, that kind of twist thing action that should happen as we walk, what you got to have is you have to have the ability to move your heel both inward, this is called inversion, so it tips out, and then it should flatten down, which is called eversion. Fancy name, but you don't have to worry about it that much. If the back of the shoe, called the heel counter, is nice and stable, meaning you don't, you push really hard and it doesn't move much, it can help promote that normal turning action that should happen as we walk, versus this dress shoe that I have doesn't provide that same capability. So if the shoe doesn't help me, my body has to be able to try to recreate that on its own, and that can be really tough for some individuals. So your first step when you're choosing a good shoe to work with, you should try and find a stable heel counter. The next piece is the arch has to be able to flatten and then come back up. And for some people, they might have a hard time with that, especially if they don't have the stable heel. So we want a little bit more support in the arch. So if I bend my shoe, you'll notice that we don't get much bend through the arch versus this bad boy right here, it can bend pretty easily. So if the shoe can bend pretty easily, that means I have to have the capability to both create an arch and flatten. If you're someone who has really high arches or you're someone who has really flat feet, that can be very challenging to do because you're at either extreme and you can't get the opposite to happen. Meaning, someone with a high arch may have a difficult time flattening, and arch support can help assist them into getting it flatter. And then someone who's got a flat foot might have a hard time arching, and therefore an arch support can help them create a bit of an arch in the foot. Now the last piece that you want is as you're stepping through a full step, you're going to be pushing off of your big toe. Therefore, we want the front part of the shoe to be flexible, because as I'm walking and I take a step and I land and I push off, I get my foot into basically that position. Some shoes, I don't have a good example of that, but like this one's pretty flexible. But some will be a bit stiffer and you won't get that adequate push off. For some folks, the stiffness here could be desirable if, for example, say you're someone who's got a bunion and your big toe doesn't move all that well, or you got something called hallux rigidus or limitus where the big toe is really stiff. Sometimes having a stiffer toe box can be helpful, but for the overwhelming majority of people, you want to have a little bit of flexibility in the front of the foot. So some of the big keys for most people when they're buying shoes is you want the heel to be stiffer, you want the arch to be stiff, and you want the front of the shoe to flex up and down. Now the next question you might be wondering is, Zach, well, what about all those minimalist shoes and the barefoot shoes? Are those useful? The short answer is it depends. It can be. If you're someone who does a lot of running or walking on hard man-made surfaces such as concrete, asphalt, things of that nature, our feet are good at arching and flattening because when we were cave people, we had to adapt to a wide variety of surfaces. The man-made surfaces such as concrete, asphalt, tile, things of that nature, they're not as adaptable as the things we had in nature. So getting the more supportive shoes, if you're going to be spending a bulk of your time there, can be helpful. But if you're someone who spends a lot of time on more adaptable surfaces such as grass or sand or desert stuff, maybe you're hiking out at Red Rock, then a more flexible shoe could be beneficial. This is especially if you have someone who's got a bit higher arches, not super high, but slightly higher arches, because the more flexible shoes, which I wouldn't hike in these, but the more flexible shoes may actually encourage you to flatten your feet. But if you are someone who's at either extreme where you got really high arches or you got really flat feet, they may not be as desirable. So if you're on adaptable surfaces, wearing more minimalist shoes can be helpful. And what about training barefoot? I get a lot of questions. Is it okay for me to train barefoot? Again, it really depends. What barefoot can do is it can help promote you flattening your feet. So if you're someone who needs that, training barefoot can be helpful. But if you're someone who already has flat feet, you might need something that's a bit more supportive, because what is really tough for those individuals who have flat feet is to create that arch. And those are really the big keys when it comes to picking appropriate footwear depending on the task that you want to do. Summarize. You want a stiff heel counter. You'll want a flexible toe box, and you want your arch to be pretty stiff in the middle. More flexible shoe wear is useful if you have somewhat higher arches and you have some adaptability in your ability to flatten your feet. They are best utilized on more adaptable surfaces such as grass, sand, hiking trails, not man-made surfaces. It's okay to train barefoot if you are that type of mid-range foot position. You just got to make sure that you select activities that promote you getting into whether you need to flatten more or arch more. And with all of that, anytime you make a change, whether it's shoes, whether it's going barefoot or anything like that, you don't want to go full bore and wear the shoes day in and day out, because your foot needs to adapt to the different stressors and stimuli. Therefore, you want to make sure that when you get any new pair of shoes, just spend a couple hours with them at a time, slowly work up your tolerance to them, and you ought to be in business. If you have any questions, you're like, Zach, I don't know what type of shoe I should need, or maybe you got some foot issues that need some assistance and you need someone to help you out, just go ahead and reach out to one of our docs at Elevate Sports Performance and Healthcare. Give us a call, 702-558-2151, or look us up on the web at elevatesph.com. Hope you have a wonderful day.